Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Chocobo Dash. I'm one of your hosts, Nell Celestine.
And I'm your other host, Elliot Lefebvre.
Now, this episode is going to be a little bit lighter and a little bit shorter than the last one. The last one, as you probably are aware, was about an hour and 40 minutes, and that was a very heavy discussion episode based off of plot. We're going to be avoiding that as much as possible regarding the end of 2.55. If you're interested and want to hear our thoughts and opinions on that, we highly suggest you go back, listen and watch that episode, and then you can come back and watch this one first if you want. But we're going to be talking a little bit more about other stuff, specifically new lore information, the live letter, and all that. So if you're looking for 2.55,
we did that, and we've only just recovered. We're only just now. Remember, I was literally falling asleep for an entire week.
Pretty much. I mean, you were like gone.
I know. I was. Well, you know, I had some sickness and I had some other things to deal with. So it wasn't actually as wonderfully dramatic as it would be. I can't rightly say it was just based on our intensely long lore discussion.
No,
it
wasn't.
Was 30%.
It was also probably the triple triad matches.
Yeah, I've been farming that Indolent Imperial. I need that coat. I need it. That's an adult responsibility.
Well, if it's any consolation, I'm only 5% of the way to the prize I want, and I've been farming for about a week now. I'm at 50k.
Yeah, but that's that's because your prize is you can't have enough triple triad cards. For me, that's just a means to an end.
Yeah, I don't think Cloud's worth 1 million MGP, but it's the only way I'm gonna get him.
Whatever. Oh, wait, wrong game. Anyway, let's move on. Let's start talking. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start on the lore, or do we want to start on the live letter?
Let's actually start a little bit elsewhere. We're going to start with the Realm Redubbed official contest.
Oh, yes. Yep, they're running a new contest now. The short of it, not the long of it, is that the contest is to take a cutscene from the storyline and redub it. It can be one with voice. It can be one without voice.
And there's two categories. There's super serious, and there's comedy. So Hildebrand! Somebody do Hildebrand! I swear to God, somebody do Hildebrand. I want to hear the best, most awesome Hildebrand ever, so that way when they give him an actual official voice, they recruit you.
Or, you can make plenty. There's plenty of room for comedy just by giving someone a comedy accent. I'm just imagining Ilberd now redubbed with a lisp.
I remember when they did this contest a while back, like just before they launched the game, and they had us redub the official trailer, and I redid the entire dialogue in Canadian. It's like, the Guardians came from the north, eh?
Well, that was real. That wasn't too nice of them, and you know, it was a bit of a problem. You know, they weren't the best guests. We didn't want to be rude or anything and turn them out. But...
if you want, look on the channel. It's there somewhere.
Now, only a couple people get to win the contest, but everybody who enters does get those fabulous bluebird earrings. So it's one of those times where if you have the time and you feel the inclination, I recommend you take part. You get some nice cosmetic earrings, and more to the point, it's really fun to do something either dramatic or just being incredibly silly.
I know, I'm entering. I want those bluebird earrings. Although technically it's bluebird earring. It's only on one ear.
Oh god, now he's starting with this.
But it'll go nicely with my bluebird.
You know what? The reason that it's only on one ear, because, you know, next patch you're losing an ear. Show of sympathy.
Wouldn't surprise me at this rate.
Everybody loses something. No more symmetry. Symmetry is for losers.
But that means we're all winners, because we're going to be getting a bunch of stuff with the expansion, because the live letter came out.
Oh, yes, it did.
So much information.
Now, not a lot of it was, you know, what I would consider hard information, but there were some interesting tidbits. One of the more interesting ones that I saw was that we now have a number for how many dungeons we're getting with the expansion launch, which is a big deal.
Indeed. How many was it again?
We are getting 8 dungeons.
Not quite as many as when A Realm Reborn launched, but still pretty significant.
It's also notable because we are only getting 10 levels. Now, something that I proposed back when the live letter came out is that if we split up, if we assume that there's a new level 50 dungeon, and that we have another dungeon every 2 levels, that's enough for us to have a new dungeon every 2 levels and 3 dungeons to choose from at the level cap. Or, if we don't get a new level 50 dungeon, then we're going to have 4 dungeons at the level cap, which would address one of the main things that people have criticized, in that if you're running an expert roulette at this point, you're always choosing between the same 3 dungeons, and Yoshida has said we're not going to have you just choosing between 3 dungeons until the end of time.
Please, thank goodness. 4, I don't think would be enough. I'm hoping that it would be like a 5 or 6. That way it's much more of a variety to pull from, so that way you don't get sick of the same dungeon so
quite as quickly. What I'm hoping for...
Or at the very least, like, as an example, say they keep doing the 3 dungeons every patch, have 6 and cycle at the bottom 3.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping is going to be the case in the future, and that's one of the weird because at this point the high level roulette really runs the gamut between Wanderer's Palace, which is a complete punchline at this point, and Sunken Sastasha Hard, which is as we all know, brutally difficult.
Yeah, it's a very steep difficulty curve in the high level roulette, and then you get into the expert, which is only 3 dungeons.
And you see those 3 dungeons over and over. So hopefully we're going to be seeing a better distribution, for lack of a better term. So we don't know exactly how that's going to shake out, but we do know there's going to be the 8 dungeons. We also know that there's going to be a lockout on lockouts in the beginning.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be drop-based for tokens rather than lockout for the week in runs. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly how they intended to be or if it was worded poorly, but it sounds like no more of this. Make a static of 8 people, never actually help anybody else ever again.
Yeah, it looks like what we're going to be looking at for harder content is much like the current Crystal Tower or what Crystal Tower used to be. You have a weekly lockout on loot, but not a weekly lockout on clearing the content. Also, when the expansion locks, it's going to be a couple weeks before we get our weekly limited tomestones, or before you get access to things like Alexander, thus ensuring that we're not going to be immediately forced to rush up to the level cap at maximum speed if you want to be at all competitive with what's going on.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice thing, because then gives the raiders at least a chance to try out the new jobs before rushing into the endgame.
See, I'm a little bit of a mixed mind on this, and while I think this is a good thing overall, I also can't help but notice, because if we're still getting the unlimited tomestone drops, then I can very easily see the level cap kind of being dominated by people who have farmed those obsessively for a couple weeks before the weekly limitations came in. But at the same time, we don't know how much of an item level gap it's going to be, and we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And the idea behind it that, you can take your time and level your character and enjoy your path to level 60 is a commendable goal.
Yes, thank goodness it's not rush, 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 go, go, go. We get enough of that in our duty finder right now.
We also have, and this is I find very interesting, they're introducing new high-end crafting systems, starting with scripts.
Yes, where if you complete a script and then you could trade it in for points that you can end up eventually getting to trade for equipment that improves your crafting skills. Is that not how it works?
It's something like that. It basically, the short version is, it basically appears to be crafting and gathering tomestones. So that you can, much like how repeating content and doing it over and over on your combat jobs will get you better and better gear, the same thing is going to apply up at the top. If you are crafting a bunch, then you get a bunch of new crafting gear. And everybody's happy.
Yeah, except for the crafters who like to try to gouge people for, that 1 point upgrade on your gear.
Yep, I don't think that's really high on the. Something tells me that no one on the development team was like, oh, but think about. Won't someone please think of the gougers?
But yeah, I can understand that make some of the stuff either really difficult to acquire, but not insanely difficult to acquire. Like make it so that way if somebody works really hard, they can get it, but not somebody who's really lucky or really rich.
Yeah, we've also been told that while melding your gear will still be an issue, it will not be quite if you want to work through scripts, aren't necessarily going to be forced to meld your gear or be hopelessly behind. So combine that with the new crafting specializations, and people are going to be able to both get into crafting a little bit easier. There's going to be less of a lockout, and there's going to be more to do as a crafter, as opposed to just trying to play the markets.
True, because as it is right now, it's basically if you weren't on the bleeding edge of crafting, you are behind. And by being behind, really far behind.
Yep.
Like, I tried to keep up when they started introducing the 2-star recipes and 3-star recipes, and now it's on 4-star recipes, and I'm still struggling with 2-star.
Yeah. I can do 3s at this point fairly reliably, but at the same time, it is a very near thing, and it's a situation where it's not really. It makes crafting more of a lockout than it needs to be, because you can't really just say, yeah, I want to craft, but I don't want that to be my focus. Either that's your focus, or you're not getting anything accomplished.
Yeah, and the crafted gear is only better if it's overmelded at the wazoo for combat classes, so pretty much everything else is just glamour.
Yep.
And so it makes little to no sense to make glamour gear such a ridiculous hurdle to get.
Yeah. And that's one of the... I mean, you, our dear listeners... I almost said dear leader. That would have been something very different, so I apologize for that. You, our dear listeners, have heard us complain before about, making crafting or glamour gear more difficult to obtain than the gear that's actually going to be, useful in content. And this is another case where it's a little harder to obtain that stuff just because it looks good. Yeah, there need to be hurdles. Yeah, we can understand that, looking good is a big deal, but you shouldn't feel like you have to make the constant choice between, well, this is actually going to improve my stats, but this really looks nice, so...
It shouldn't be an issue of whether or not you have billions of gil or, have been on the bleeding edge of marketing and crafting in order to make something that looks half decent to cover your dreadworm.
Yeah, but it appears that we're getting a lot of differences and a lot of updates to the looting system. We also know that it looks like primals are going back to the design that was closer to what we had in 1.0, where rather than simply killing a primal and hope that it drops a weapon, you kill a primal and you get tokens that you can turn in to buy primal weapons.
Also, it's more like the 1.0 Garuda and less like 1.0 Ifrit.
Yeah. Which, and again, this is all off of the live letter. We don't know how much of this is going to play out exactly once everything goes live, but we do have, these do seem to be the design goals moving forward, which means that...
Now, keep in mind this is all still subject to possible change upon before or even just after release.
Yes. Nothing is confirmed until the game is actually... the expansion is actually live, and it ain't live yet, so...
And even then, stuff can technically be changed. It is an MMO, it's not a final product.
Yep.
Alright, but what about some of the other stuff from the live letter? Let's take a look at the jobs, shall we?
Yes, let's talk about the jobs. Go ahead, because I can tell you are gung-ho to talk about some of these jobs.
The fact that Machinist is going to... basically, the gun itself is the weapon, but the barrel is the augmentation or attachments, and that's what changes how the Machinist works.
Yep, and it sounds like it's going to include a difference between mobility and
power,
which is it's a good compromise. One of the things that 14 has done pretty consistently is stress the idea that, because let's face it, and Nell, I know you primarily play ranged DPS, you can agree that it's a little easier to be ranged DPS than it is to be in melee. You are much more likely to get smacked by something you don't want in melee than if you're standing off at a distance. So as a result, ranged has to make some trade-offs. You can't quite deal, like either you have to stay put to get things done, or in the case of Summoner, you aren't able to deal as much upfront damage, or in the case of Bard, you're more of a utility character. Well,
except nobody actually does that, because they're all like, my DPS needs to be higher, so I don't bother singing.
At which point you actually are less useful than basically anything, including a Summoner who has Titan out. But let's not get into that this week. The point...
If you guys want us to do a topic on that, leave a comment in the box below.
I can talk about how much I dislike Bard players for months. Anyway. But
why don't you talk about Astrologian?
Okay, I can talk a little bit about Astrologian. A lot of this, again, as Nell said, nothing is a final product, so we don't know for sure exactly what it's going to... But we know that Astrologian is going to have a different focus from the other. Let me take a quick glance at the live letter transcript again, because I need to refresh my memory a little bit. Astrologian was not my... It's not my first love, so...
True enough. But we do know all the new jobs are going to start at 30, which means there's no class quests, so you automatically just start off with the stone.
Yep, and we knew that they were going to start fairly... We knew that they were not going to start at level 1, but we didn't know exactly when they were going to start up until now. So we now have a clearer picture of what it's going to be, where we're going to start, and how much...
Here's a question then. If I'm on a level 30, say, Dark Knight, can I go into Sestasha, and what abilities will be kept and which ones will be locked out, or will they all be there? Because the job starts at 30.
Yeah, it's not... And that's an interesting question, and I don't know at this point. I'm tempted to say that, I don't know if you've seen, but there have been a few leaks at this point.
I have been avoiding those because I can't confirm them, so I'd rather not get my hopes up or down on something that may or may not be confirmed.
I'm not saying, none of it obviously is confirmed. None of it is, so that's important to note, and I think it's very important to, anything you see leaked, if you do look them up, I do look them up, not because I think they're confirmed, but just because I think it's worth seeing what the rumor is. But, anything you see there is 90% speculation until it's proven otherwise. But it looks like we're going to have an interesting... I don't want to say split exactly, but there's definitely influences from other classes that we've seen in what has supposedly been leaked so far.
I do remember seeing one, and it looked like it hinted at another job, which is why I immediately dismissed it.
Yeah, I don't think we're... I think at this point we've heard what... I know I was one of the first people who was speculating that we may have more than the 3 jobs that we had already heard about, but no, at this point, it seems pretty clear that that this is what we're getting. So, but I'm personally most excited for Dark Knight, because I'm really looking forward to seeing what it brings to the table. I'm looking forward to seeing how it tanks, because we're seeing 2 things happening with Dark Knight. One is that, Dark Knight traditionally is kind of the inverse of Paladin, and the other thing is that it's a 3rd tanking class which is taking on a different kind of tanking in the form of evasion tanking, as opposed to how Warrior just soaks everything, or Paladin has a high mitigation value. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that is balanced, and how traditionally Dark Knight things like sacrifice some of your health to do X are going to be played out.
And all I'm going to say is if you have a Dark Knight as a tank, chances are you're not going to have a monk.
Quite possibly you're not.
Well, look at it this way. If the Dark Knight is an evasion tank, that Dark Knight is going to be moving that mob around left, right, and center. And that's going to destroy a monk's positioning.
See, all I'm thinking is just if you're dealing... I'm just thinking of the monk I had in a group last night who was, basically doing less DPS than a summoner pet, so...
Yeah, but you can't do anything about that.
No, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how these new jobs play out, and it's also interesting because we've seen some of the lore for these 3 new jobs. That we got a big update to the official site that included new lore on all the jobs, new lore on the Aura. So we've got a picture of what Dark Knight's going to look like, how it's going to shake out, what Machinist's deal is.
The only thing that we know for sure is that Raubon is definitely not going to be the Dark Knight teacher.
No,
Which,
it does not.
If you follow me on Twitter, I said that if it's not Raubon, the damn well better be named either Gots or Guts. And if you get that reference, you're awesome.
Yeah, I'm personally I mean, we don't know it for a certain confirmed fact just yet, but we know that at this point, Dark Knight is very, very Ishgardian. It is definitely an Ishgard job. It is tied to Ishgard lore. It's not something that Raubon would be a part of.
Mastrologian is Charlarian.
Yep, Charlarian.
And not Ishgardian.
No. Well, that's one of the... We'd been told before that technically Astrologian... Because Astrologian has been used to refer to an Ishgardian occupation, it's also the version in Japanese. The word is slightly different, and they had considered...
A different word.
Yeah, they considered, astrologian and astrologer, but they ultimately decided in localization it's too close, and it would just produce confusion, and everyone would just call it the same thing. So it's also possible, and they haven't said anything. What we know is that the art originated as a Charlian art, and presumably what we are using is the Charlian art. It's possible that the Ishgardian astrologians are using a weaker or corrupted version of that art.
It's entirely possible.
And then last but not least, we have Machinist, and Machinist is actually part of it. We found out that Machinist is actually part of a weapon shop which is located in Ishgard. So a lot of people had speculated, does this have a tie to the Ironworks? Does this have a tie to Goblin technology or Garlean? Nope. All of this is, apparently it was just inspired by the successes of the Ironworks, trying to find a more efficient solution to deal with dragons.
And Steps of Faith, all those weapons that you used were designed by the steel forge that Machinists are going to be coming from.
So, if you...
So you've already had a taste of some of their wares.
Yep. And if you are having trouble with the dragon killers, well, you should have read the manual first.
RTFM.
We also got a little... Oh, go ahead.
If you get that one, then I don't know how old you are.
We also got to look at the Aura and the 2 different tribes, one of which has more of a Tibetan flavor, and one of which has a more Mongolian flavor. Remember,
both of which flavors are delicious.
Yes, if you're not getting the Mongolian thing, remember that you've got the Zayla roaming around the steppes, and remember that on that continent they don't use horse birds; they use straight up horses.
So when you think about that for a minute, they're the exception to every rule from any kind of military purpose, just like the Mongols.
And they're still pretty good at what they do.
But for the Tibetan ones, you have the other side, and I believe they're the more pale-skinned ones with the silver scales.
Yes.
And they're more of a peaceful society trying to settle down and live off the land rather than nomadic lifestyles.
Now, I'm a little disappointed by what the Aura has revealed, mostly because I've been one of the first people who said, okay, I'm not fond of how strikingly different males and females are in terms of scale, but maybe it's a quirk of the character creation, like maybe they turn down the height on one and turn up the height on the other. Nope. That's apparently coded in there, and that's
dumb?
Yeah, that's really, really dumb, and that's really unpleasant. I know that they've said that there's going to be a fair amount of customization, and there always is. But I would have liked to have seen our skewing a little closer to a unified look. I feel like the women are a little too wispy.
Dainty.
But not that I'm not going to make one, and not that I'm not still looking forward to it. I just feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity, and it's kind of a misstep in a game that's been, up until now, very inclusive and very, very good about not presenting any kind of stereotypical roles for a lot of people.
Yeah, but we'll see how things go as the time comes along, because as it is right now, we don't have that much new information.
No, we don't have a full picture of it. We know that we should be getting the benchmark sometime in the near future, but we don't know. We don't have firm pictures just yet. But the pictures we do have, the bits and pieces, it's pretty interesting.
But I am definitely looking forward to the benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually some interesting comments on the Twitter page when they showed off some pictures of the benchmark. They showed off the really nice looking room and the floor. Mm-hmm. And Pressimont, if you know that gentleman from Omnom's famous comics,
mm-hmm.
mentioned that as a Dragoon, he was admiring the extra work that they put into the floors. To which I replied, as a part-time healer, I would wish you would spend more time looking at the floors before you died, rather than after.
Hey, when it happens, it happens.
I couldn't hold it in. It was too good of a joke.
Couldn't or wouldn't?
Yes.
Okay. So, is there anything else we want to bring up? Any other stunning revelations that we can think of that happened? Any more things that will shock and awe our viewers and listeners to their core? I don't know why I'm talking like this, but I am.
Dramatic emphasis?
Yes, apparently.
Not as of yet, but bear in mind that in a couple months there will be a temporary hiatus for Chocobo Dash.
Yep.
One of us will be moving across the country. That will be me. So
I already did my moving, so I'm here. I'm here.
But it'll be end of June, beginning of July-ish. So during that time period, for probably a better part of a month, there most likely won't be any Chocobo Dash. I will do my best to keep people informed over Twitter when I can, but as of this time, that's pretty much the time period it's going to be me moving and getting set up in the new studio.
Yep.
Which I have so many of you people to thank. So many people, because so many people showed up and cheered and helped out with the 48-hour marathon, and we raised $450 out of the possible 1,000. So it was a lot more than I was expecting. I'm very thankful. You guys are amazing.
Yep, thank you all, because, as much as I would love to, I can't personally drive up and help Nell move myself, so
not
she
even
100%
for some
deserves
Transformers.
help. Not even for some Transformers. Look, Nell, you're a good friend, but there's only so much that I'm willing to do for a sideswipe.
Alright, with that in mind, everybody, please leave any positive, negative comments in the box below. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow us both on Twitter. I'm at Nell Celestine.
And I'm at Elliot_Lefebvre.
If you leave us messages either on Twitter or the official Lodestone topic or in the YouTube video, those are the best ways to reach us, and we usually reply to those in a timely fashion. Any other locations, including the Wisdom of Nim, tend to be a little bit slower for us to reply to, but we do check every source out there that we can. As always, this is Nell Celestine.
And this is Elliot Lefebvre.
Bidding you
Adieu.
adieu.